Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final day of the Culturally Competent Conversations for Equity and Belongingness Summit, or the C3EB Summit. I hope you've been enjoying all of the content you've been seeing over the past 3 days. Today's theme is, overall has been, how do we go about building a culturally competent society for all of us? And it goes without saying that art and creativity are a huge part of building this culturally competent society that allows people to take care of their own mental well-being and thrive in their respective spaces. With that, and that is actually what this current session is going to be about. And before I introduce our guest expert speaker for this session, just a couple of housekeeping notes, which I feel like all of you should just say it back to me instead of me saying it to you at this point. Make sure you put your comments in on our YouTube channel, C3EB Summit, or our Facebook page, also C3EB Summit. We are monitoring our comments even after the live sessions are done. So whenever you watch this, if you go in and comment, we will make sure that the speaker gets your questions or any feedback that you have so that we can all continue to improve. Last thing before I introduce, I am extremely thankful for our partners and sponsors who believe in the C3EB dream and have been walking this walk with us toward equity, belongingness, and intentional inclusion. So a huge thank you to Essential IT, to Defy the Status Quo Marketing, to Zanzibar Enterprises, and to the Nielsen Company. With that being said, it is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce all of you, whether you're about to be here live or watching this later, to one of my dearest friends from childhood, Dr. From high school, actually, Dr. Nicole Carter, Ph.D. Nicole Carter, Dr. Carter, is the founder and curator of the CIS brand. She is the CEO and curator of the CIS brand, a creative multi-industry company designed to meet the needs of women, particularly women of color, in the areas of writing, wellness, and workspace design. In addition, she is also the director of the Wright State University's Women's Center. She also teaches in various fields, including the Student Affairs and Higher Education Program and the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Program. Her foci include the intersectional experiences of women in university settings, persistence and retention of women in higher education, and the creation of counter spaces for women students of color and women students in STEM. She received her PhD from Eastern Michigan University, and today she is going to be talking to us about the power of art and creativity in healing and taking care of ourselves and the critical need for it. So without further ado, Dr. Nicole Carter, my friend, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, AJ. So thank you, everybody, for and really within understanding of wellness and the role that art and creativity plays within that equity. So there are some questions that I really have been thinking about, and I've asked several people about when it comes to wellness. And I offer you all the opportunity to reflect for a moment on some questions about wellness. So the first one is, as a child, were you informed about what it means to be well? Did anyone teach you about prioritizing wellness? What were some of the approaches to wellness used, if they were used at all? And was it ever defined for you, the term wellness? So I want to give a second to reflect on some of those questions, and I'll tell you why in a few. So if you reflected, I know that wasn't a really long time, but I want us to have an opportunity for questions and conversation towards the end. So I asked you these questions again, because these are things that I started to think about when it related to my wellness journey. And so I think they're important questions, and I will again tell you why. So before going into my personal why or reasoning, I would like to just share with you how I understand through research and through my work, particularly with women of color and college-age students, what it means to have equitable wellness. So equitable understanding and equitable opportunities to be well. So the first thing is, in order for it to be equitable, there needs to be the belief that individual wellness shapes the wellness of the larger community and larger societies. And so again, like this understanding that our individual wellness is connected to others. And so we are not well for wellness sake, even though that is okay. It is for a larger purpose as well. It is also the belief that Western culture does not and really should not dictate notions of wellness. And so wellness can be and should be based in indigenous ideas of wellness, indigenous ideas of health and well-being. And please understand that those are different things as well. But it's not just based in Western culture. And then the third thing is that equitable wellness means that there is a belief that the wisdom of individuals who experience inequities should be centered and part of the conversation. So there is, like, for me, like something that I always say when it relates to wellness and reading information about it and different things like that. And it is hashtag wellness so white. And it's because when I try to find things related to wellness being placed within organizations and then my own individual wellness practices, it is always authored by, for the most part, white folks. And that to me does not always speak to those who could benefit the most from a wellness practice. And so again, equitable wellness means centering the wellness and experiences of those who have been marginalized within American society and within other societies as well. So on a personal note, I want to share my why. So why I'm even having this conversation, why I started to focus on wellness, why I am currently building a brand and have a company, the Sis brand, that is focused on creative ways to enhance wellness for women of color. So my first reasoning is my own experience with encountering and witnessing intersectional microaggressions. So not just racialized microaggressions, although within the city that I live in right now, that is the majority of the microaggressions that I experience. They are based on race. but they're also based on gender and based on ability as well. And so for me, like I always provide this example that when I talk about, I work as a director of a women's center, and when I talk about experiences with microaggressions, with trauma and things like that, it is often assumed that when it comes to gender-based microaggressions and trauma, that doesn't include me. That I have not encountered different things related to that. But as a faculty member on a college campus, as a director on a college campus, and now as an entrepreneur as well, I constantly face various microaggressions. And I talk to so many young people that experience similar things, and they don't have a means of moving past it or working through it or healing from it. My other why is this unmasking of my own personal autoimmune diseases that have happened really over the last 10 years. So when I was working on my Ph.D., when I started writing my dissertation, I started to get ill during that time. And I sort of just pushed it away, like didn't really worry about it. At that time also, because I was a student and I was older than 26 years old, I didn't have health insurance either. So it wasn't like a thing like, oh, let me just go to a specialist and see what they say. But I just know I wasn't feeling well at that time. I was always tired. I always had stomach pains and different things like that. And it continued. I would push it away and I would go to like an urgent care, and they would try to provide me with something, some med to kind of calm the symptoms, if you will, but it never dealt with the underlying issue. And so eventually I was diagnosed with several autoimmune diseases. The first was Crohn's disease, the second being rheumatoid arthritis, and then the third being thought, still being tested, but the third being lupus. And so all of these things sort of put me in a position where I had to kind of wake up to wellness and ask myself, really, do you want to live through this? Do you want to survive, or do you want to thrive? And my answer has always been, I want to thrive. I don't want to just survive through this. I don't want to just have to continuously take meds and that be it, but I want to live a full life. Because I deserve to have a full life. So my other why is also something that I'm constantly dealing with, just like the other two. But the other why is poorly treated mental and emotional stress. And I say poorly treated because for a long time, I thought popping meds, right, like medication, was the solution alone. And a consistent therapy practice, a consistent meditation practice, consistent, creative practice, which I'll talk about, were not included in my idea of dealing with mental wellness and emotional wellness. And all these things within me, my personal experiences, but also seeing all of these things, including the autoimmune diseases and the emotional and mental stress of women of color who look just like me, but who are just happen to be younger than me, have led me to ask more from myself and more from those who specialize in working in industries related to wellness. And I was not satisfied with the answers. And so that is my reason, the reason why I even created a company or a brand focused on wellness for women of color. So some key questions when I was going through these things, and to be honest, like these are things that we constantly go through. So it's not like I went through those things then and I'm fine now because I learned a wellness practice and everything's good, but it's not, right? So these are questions that I asked myself then and I continue to ask myself now. And there are questions that really come up as I experience life, and they will be different and the answers will look different. But these are some key questions that continue to come up for me. And they helped me really understand and to begin to do research and ground ideas or concepts of wellness in something that was intentional and authentic. And so the first one for me was, sorry, what does it mean and what will it take for me to be well? So not what other people have written about or not what is promoted all the time via social media or things like that, but what will it take for me to be well? What space or spaces assist in this wellness? And how can I continue a practice of wellness? So how can I embody wellness when things get tough, right? How can I practice these things on days where I feel like this is not something I want to do, right? And so these questions for me led me to a particular type of wellness, but it is inclusive of what some call the continuum of wellness. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. So in this, I discovered for me that wellness needed to be grounded in several things. So the first thing was wellness needed to be grounded in that which was creative. So when I was going through my Ph.D. program, the only reason I finished, I believe, was because I discovered my own artistic abilities. And I began to involve myself in a group called The Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, which was a group of women dedicated to educating the community about hip hop culture and knowledge of self, art, all of these different things, but also the role that women played in hip hop culture. And when I found that group, I was invited to not only learn about a very specific type of art, but like acrylics and things like that. But I was invited to engage in live art and the creation in real time of things. And that opportunity really shaped my entire life. Like it is because of that reason that I completed my PhD program, but it is because of that reason, and not to get too personal, but I'll just be honest, it is because of that reason that I am here today. Like I would not be here if I did not find my own creative abilities. And so I continue that art today. It is something that ebbs and flows, but I do recognize when my wellness is not grounded in that which is creative, things are off. My life is off, my emotions are off, right? Like just things are chaotic. And so creativity gave me an opportunity for catharsis or to release the emotional instability that really continues to exist throughout all of our lives. But creativity created an opportunity for calm. The other thing that wellness for me and for many of the women that I work with needed to be grounded in was this concept of intersectionality. So if wellness is going to be equitable, then it's going to understand that we are not, like, for example, I am not just a Black person. I am not just a woman. I am not just a person with an invisible disability or illness. I am not just a woman from Detroit or a person from Detroit. All of those things together shape my experience. And so when thinking about wellness practices, all of those things relate to what I need to be well. So wellness needs to speak to all of those pieces of me, those intersections of my identity. And wellness provides solutions to the oppressions that I face because of those intersections of identity. The third thing is this wellness needed to be grounded in intergenerational perspectives. Some people might call this, might say, a decolonized version of wellness or decolonizing wellness, or being attentive to the wisdom of our ancestors. And so this is just another way of saying that. But I've found that when wellness is grounded in the principles and practices and wisdom of those before me, it actually works. It actually continues. It actually is sustainable. So these are three components of wellness that I believe to be equitable. And all of these together, the creativity, intersectionality, and intergenerational perspectives speaks to the experiences of people of color, of indigenous communities. We are creative people, we are intersectional, and we are community-based people. And so therefore the intergenerational perspective is important. So I love this quote, and to me, it speaks to the role of creativity and processes of healing and wellness. And so it reads, "I am creativity waiting to serve in the darkness of your chaos, to affirm my presence as the ordering principle that empowers you to reform anew." To me, this quote speaks to the definition of catharsis. Creation through, like, catharsis through creation. For me, engaging in creative wellness means that I am creating myself anew again and again. It means that if I have the ability to create, it means that I have the ability to be well. And if I have the ability to be well, then, right, like, there is always an opportunity for me to practice wellness and be okay, really, to be affirmed. So in addition to the three components of equitable wellness that I believe speaks to communities of color and indigenous communities, is this idea of the continuum of wellness. And so the continuum of wellness means that not only does wellness include concepts related to emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual health and or wellness, but it is inclusive of that which has helped communities of color thrive. And so it should include social, cultural, and creative wellness. And that continuum goes back to those three components. It is something that is based in our interpersonal relationships, is based in our ancestral knowledge. It is based in creative practices. And this is not just art, this is writing, this is music, this is dance, This is cooking. This is like all of these things that include the creation of something new or the recreation of something that has been, is part of this continuum of wellness. So likewise, wellness is not a place, but wellness is a continuous space and practice. So I think this is important to note because sometimes people talk about wellness and they automatically talk about healthiness or health. And people talk about wellness and they talk about well-being. But wellness is a practice. It is a practice that we can always contribute to. It is a space. We are well. We are practicing wellness, and we are doing things to maintain that wellness. So it is not something that we get to and then, oh, it's okay, it's over. We don't have to do anything because now we're well. Because it's the realization that things happen. Things happen that bring on chaos, that disrupt our sense of wellness, that disrupt our sense of joy, particularly right now, during the times of COVID. Death is rampant, like illness is all around us, job loss is all around us, all of these things. But all of those things necessitate wellness, the need for this continuous space and continuous practice. So in closing, I just want to share again that for me, wellness should be grounded in this idea that we are constantly creating what it means to be well. We are constantly creating things that will aid in our well-being. It is something that is inclusive of others. It involves community. It involves dialogue. It involves healing, right? And then this idea of wellness should be, again, centered on the experiences of those who have been marginalized the most within our communities, and we should listen to them. And so as an example, and I want to close with this example, one of the things that I've done within my work as a director of a women's center is create that space and that opportunity for practice for women of color in a leadership and mentorship community or cohort, as I call it. And that is dedicated to various forms of wellness with creativity at its center. But it is based in that continuum, but it provides them with an opportunity to get away from spaces that don't center them and don't recognize them as knowledgeable and don't recognize them as having wisdom and don't recognize women of color. That's what I'm talking about when I say them, but don't recognize them as really masters of their fate. And so I just encourage you to, when we think about wellness, when we think about equity in institutions and organizations, that we, one, think about the role of wellness in promoting equity and inclusion, but also think about who should be part of those conversations related to wellness. And that is all I have. I think we're supposed to open it up for questions.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
Here. I was like, oh no, I'm not in the screen.
It's okay.
So thank you so much for that. I have quite a few people in my family, as I'm sure we all do at this point, who have the visible but also invisible illnesses. And what you're saying here makes me really consider my own creative patterns as they ebb and flow. I like to play guitar and I also like to paint. But those are things I learned later in my life. And something that came to mind was the defunding of creative programs in our schools. And my entire experience with the C3EB Summit, one of the things I learned, right, is that a lot of majority school districts also, their intersectionality also often is that they are a lower income school district. And so I have to imagine that art programs are the first to go. And so I'm wondering how you think the defunding of these creative type of subjects in our schools are affecting our kids and their ability to remain well.
It actually is extremely heartbreaking, actually, to know that that is happening. But I also know, so when I was living in Detroit, my dad was a public school teacher for 42 years. And they started to eliminate, right, like art and theater and then some of those public schools, they never had theater in the first place, right? And art was like not a thing either. They did have like band and music, and now those have somewhat been eliminated. But to me, it is problematic. And I say that because that is one of the only ways that they can learn about wellness, right? And it's often not even spoken as like creative wellness, but it is one of their only opportunities to practice it, even if they're not calling it by that name. And I mean, to me, it hinders the ability for young people to be creative and critical thinkers once they leave those spaces. It hinders the ability for us to autonomously work to help our own selves, right? But also to be part of a community that is well. So, I mean, so here, where I am now, those things are there, right? There's theater, there's all of these different opportunities to be creative, and they even have things related to wellness. And so it is a vast difference. So for me, there need to be policies that focus and activism around, and I'm sure that happens, right? There are people pushing for it, but people don't always listen. So
that's true. Hopefully more people will become aware of this, because I know art is often, used, like you said, as a therapy method as well, in addition to the ability to provide a form of expression for things that we cannot necessarily put words to. So hopefully as more people grow aware of that application and how creativity helps us remain well, more people will push their school districts to either reinstate or just instate in the first place, or continue to support those types of programs.
yeah.
But thank you so much for this. Just every single session I watch, I learn something different, something new, something else to consider. I have 4 children, so that was kind of where that question came from, especially since I'm a creative person. But thank you so much for being a part of this first inaugural C3EB Summit experience.
I also will say, I know that it is important to involve the community in those creative practices. So in you saying that you're a creative person just made me think of that. And because a lot of people will say, well, it's on the parents to show their children how to be creative and how to do these things. And I mean, there's that. But a lot of these parents, when we're talking about school districts that are underfunded and most of the students are coming there from working class and or impoverished communities, the parents are not focused on that because they're focused on surviving.
Right. Like that's a survival level
Right.
area, you know, thing that they're at. Yeah, I agree.
Right. And art, I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I was growing up, art was not like oh yeah, we like, no, you need to go into business or something like that. Like, I don't know, you need to focus on these things that are gonna actually allow you to make money, not
Yeah.
to, you know, be abstract and out there, like come back, right? Focus. So but I do recognize, so like in Detroit, there is a large arts community, and it's in like the neighborhoods, not downtown or like places that have been gentrified or things like that. And so I think it's important for when schools are not doing their part, it is important for communities to play a role as well. Because I mean, the community, like, and that's what I was talking about. It should be intergenerational. It should involve multiple people and multiple voices, so that wisdom can be shared. And so there are ways to, I guess, get around it. But we also just have to inform folks that this is a possibility in the first place.
For sure. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time again and for supporting us here and, you know, putting that message out there. It's certainly something that, you know, all of us should consider. So thank you very much.
No problem.
And I'd like to take the time again to thank all of our sponsors and partners. And if you are watching this right now or watching this later, we have a lot of sessions for you to pick from. And there are still live sessions ongoing today through the closing keynote, which will be given by Dr. AJ. Or no, Dr. AJ will do her closing notes. But please join us there, like, share, comment, and we will see you in some of the later sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.